Hi, Sally Foley-Lewis here with another episode of the Spark Leadership video series. And I'm absolutely delighted to be with Sally Graham, who is the National Manager, Professional Development for the Governance Institute of Australia. So welcome to the series, Sally.
Thank you, Sally. I'm very pleased to be here with you.
Yeah, great name. Had to say it. I think I say that every time I speak with you because we're a rare breed.
Sally to Sally, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, before we jump into these questions about self-leadership, just a quick note. What's the Governance Institute of Australia?
Well, we are a membership organisation or association, and we represent about the community of governance professionals across Australia and internationally. So company secretaries, governance professionals, risk professionals, and we offer education, advocacy, policy advocacy, all types of professional development, which is what I'm in charge of there, and events, networking, lots of training, education, all of that. So we're a wonderful organisation, and we represent something that's extremely important to many organisations, in fact, all organisations, whether they be ASX 200, whether they be not-for-profits, small to medium organisations. Governance and effective governance is extremely important. And I think we see a lot of governance failures. You look at the media, that's where you don't want to be. So being part of our organisation keeps you understanding what best practice looks like and also participating in activities that improve both individual and organisational governance practice. That's
When
who
you
we
said
are.
that, when you said it's about all those risks, we know about the governance that's gone wrong. It's almost like staying off the front page of the paper or staying off the off
Well,
the first.
being there for the right reasons.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you. And I love what you do, and I admire your work. So thank you, and I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us to talk about your perspective as a senior leader on self leadership. So let's go back to basics. Over to you. What's self leadership in your definition?
So I'm an educator, so I've spent quite a bit of time in teaching and learning. And to me, self-leadership is really about thinking about your own thinking. So it's a metacognitive process. So you need to be aware of how you understand things, of your own thought processes, and how you take that and manifest that into actions and implementation. So it's really quite a reflective process. So teachers are quite good at reflective thinking and self-reflection because we have to take what we've done and think about how it worked, analyse it. Was it effective? What do I need to do differently next time to make it effective or more effective? And I think that's something that you need to bring to your understanding of self-leadership. You need to be continuously thinking about how what you're doing is having an impact. If it's not having an impact, you need to change what you're doing. If it is having an impact, is it the right impact? Is it heading to the strategic outcome you want to achieve? It really does enable you to be a continuous learner when you have reflective practice. You need all those things we do. We read, professional reading, we observe what's going on and how people who do things really well do them. So we learn from that. We question. People on boards, for example, need to understand how to ask the right questions and the best questions. We listen, and then we reflect on all of that. And that then turns into how we actually practice ourselves. It's really a continuous learning objective. You need to keep learning, keep thinking, am I doing this the way I should be doing it to get the best outcome? If we were all doing the same thing we were doing 5 or 10 years ago still, we wouldn't be having much progress. So to me, that self-leadership is really about that. It's also about motivation, though. You need to understand why you're there, what you're there to achieve, and how are you motivated yourself. And to me, that's a lot about my internal voice. You know, what gets me up in the morning, what I want to achieve in the next 24 hours or the next week, the next 6 months, the next year. But it's also about your external voice, what you're presenting to others, especially when you're a manager or the leader of a team. How are you communicating what's motivating you to your team so that your team and yourself and the organization are all on that same journey? Because if we're not really an organization, are we? We're just a whole bunch of individuals with our own ideas.
Yes, and what starts from within, like your motivators and your self-talk, and which are driven by your values and beliefs, you know, that filters through to your actions and your behaviors, which are, you know, how you speak with others and how you're going to lead your team, or how you're going to participate on a board or lead or be the chair of the board. So
very true.
Yeah, I'm loving that distinction as well around. It's a metacognitive process about thinking about how you think about yourself. It's taken me a long time to get my head around what the meta has actually meant, and okay, I'm good looking, but I'm a bit slow. But it's that how do I think about this thinking that I'm doing, and how do I think about my self-leadership in the way I am leading oneself, and therefore how that shows up in the world. I think that's incredibly important piece for people to get in a big way. Yeah,
it certainly is. I think there's not enough of it. And a lot of us do it without realizing we're doing it. But I think when you formalize the process of that self-analysis, that's when you start to get real outcomes.
Definitely. Yeah. And sorry, go on.
It's something we use. I was an English teacher, and you teach this with students. You know, they write journals, for example, which are a reflective process. And so it is something that forms part of the school curriculum. So it's not an accidental process. It's something people do learn.
Yeah, I've had some connections with early childhood education, and I know that the ECE leaders are required and to do reflective practice. So I think there's something in it, really, isn't it, for that process? So so let's keep going with that. What do you think the impact of self-leadership has on anyone's sort of confidence, influence, or courage, particularly as a leader?
It's enormous. You need to believe in yourself before others will believe in you. So if you have no self-belief, or you have self-doubt, or you don't really articulate or understand what journey you're on, it's a bit hard for you to be a leader. And I'm not saying that all leaders do that perfectly, or that I've ever done it perfectly. I think when you're initially appointed as a leader, you have a lot of that self-doubt, and it's a learning process itself. But to be a senior leader, you do need to come to a position where you're comfortable in your own belief, self-belief, and self-awareness, and your ability to lead. So without that, people will sense that you're not comfortable, and they themselves will then not be comfortable because they're looking to you for their own journey in terms of their development, and they're developing their self-leadership. I think it's very true that people do leave jobs because of other leaders rather than because of the organization. I certainly have done that in the past. So it is an extremely important thing for organisations to develop their leaders.
Yeah.
People have potential, they might have great skills, they're appointed to leadership roles, but that development is only just beginning. It's not something that, wow, you're a leader now, that's it, I'm where I need to be. It's really just the start of that journey.
Yeah, and that's a fixed mindset right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't want that sort of thing.
Mm.
I think it comes back to that, as I mentioned about self-leadership, it's continuous improvement. You need to be on a journey of continuous improvement. The world is extremely dynamic and change is rapid, particularly where I am in the education space, and you just can't be static. You can't be static in your attitude, your practices. You need to be adopting new technologies, for example, which are changing as we speak. You need to learn how to improve. Students look to educational institutions for best practice, for tomorrow's skills and abilities, not for yesterday's. So we need to make sure that that type of thing is part of your leadership mantra as well.
Definitely.
You yourself continually improve. I get a bit lethargic if things are static. I like the pace of change to be reasonable. It doesn't have to be too rapid, but if it's really slow, I find that frustrating. There's no win, or there's no if there's no win or sense of achievement, even in sound bites, little chunks of achievement, then I find that really, it doesn't motivate me. So we need to just keep that. It's a bit like a cycle. That cycle just keeps moving. So I think if you can see the purpose, you can share the pathway with people, and then everyone's on the same shared vision. I think that's important. That's where you need to be. If that's lacking, then one or more of those components needs work. And that's our job as leaders, to figure that out, but also make sure everybody has an input to that and everybody understands why. A bit like adult learners, if they can't see the relevance, they can't see where it's taking them, then they're not going to be motivated to continue.
For sure. Yeah. Times, life's too short unless I know why. Life's too short.
Kind of. And they're busy people, professional people. I'm devoting 3 hours to this class I'm in. There better be relevance.
Yes. Yes. Or the phrase, as one of my dear old colleagues in this industry said, dance monkey, so I can, prove it to me that this is worth my time. And I thought, that's harsh, but at the essence of it, it was like, make this good, make it worth my time, and make me understand why I'm here. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I like the point that you also said about that self-belief that when you get into a leadership role, that you can actually handle things. And I think that I agree, and I want to build on that, because I think there's sort of two bits to that. There's we don't know everything, and we certainly can't always predict the future unless we're making the future, unless we're the inventor of the new thing that's coming down the pike. But we also don't know how the market might react to it. But as a leader, it's that confidence to know that I've got everything on board and around me to handle what comes, even though I don't know what's coming. And I think that slight distinction might provide that a little bit of confidence and even a bit of courage to be an even more effective leader, and belief in yourself that you've got the skills, even if the experience that's coming at you is new.
Yeah, and another really important component of that is myself as a leader. I have a leader as well. So there are leaders above me, and those leaders instill in me the confidence to make those decisions
Mm.
and also support those decisions in terms of budget, in terms of resourcing. That's extremely important, because if you have great ideas but you can't do anything about them, and no one really believes that what you're saying is worth pursuing, then there's a gap there in terms of influence or in terms of that shared vision I talked about. So that's really important. You know, my leaders are very supportive, and that enables me as a leader as well.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
therefore enables my team. So that's extraordinarily important.
Yes, definitely. You can see where it would stifle and strangle and bottleneck otherwise. So
Yeah.
I think your point there is absolutely needs to be taken into account. Yeah.
Part of my job is to make sure that I can articulate what I need or what I want to achieve appropriately, so that the leaders above me do understand why, how it fits into the strategy, why it's important for our membership, for example, or our audience, and really to influence and sell that. So that's part of my job as well as a leader.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So, you know, maybe I want to hear from sort of when it hasn't gone so well. And it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, if there is a scenario or a situation, or maybe it's even been COVID, where, you know, we get knocked sideways a little bit and we need to reignite that spark within us and really reignite our self-leadership. I'm wondering, is there something or you know, there's a story or an experience, and it doesn't have to be your own, but just something that you could share where you could see the self-leadership need to be reignited. How did you do that, or how did it happen? And say maybe one or two lessons from that.
I guess for me, I was working in the finance industry for quite some time before I entered education, and I was offered an opportunity to go on a certain career pathway within that industry, and that involved some further study. And I had to make a decision. Do I want to do that? Or if I'm going to study, do I want to study something of my own choice? So that was a bit of a crossroads for me. I could sort of take up this opportunity, and it was reasonably safe. You know, it was something I was interested in, but I wasn't particularly passionate about it. What I'd always really wanted to do was to enter education. So I'd found myself in training roles in the finance industry, but I wanted to understand education more. So that was my tipping point. I decided I would go to uni and complete an education degree. My kids had gone to school, you know, it was a little bit more achievable. So that's what I did. I thought, I'm going to study, but I'm going to study in the area I choose. So I went with what my original career choice was to go into education and be a teacher. And so that was a pivotal point for me. And I found that taught me an awful lot. And taught me a lot about how people learn, a lot about the barriers that exist. It also taught me about, once you achieve a state of, I'm a big fan of, and I've got his book here, Peter Senge's The Fifth Discipline. Big fan of his writing. And I found that you get to this state where you think you know something well enough. You've got that state of personal mastery. That's what he calls it. But there's a lot beyond that. And going in to study education really taught me about how others learn. So how teams learn, how you really need to have people focusing in on the same thing about setting goals and moving towards that state where organisations actually know collectively what they want to achieve. So that was an extremely valuable process for me, and I continued that with further study in education. So to me, that was the big change. And that, I guess that's where I got to a point in my career where I felt I didn't have a career. I felt I had a job, and I wanted a career rather than a job. It was a pretty good job, but it wasn't, in my view, something that was going to take me through my career stages. So I guess that was my wake-up call. And I'm really glad I had it, because I'm much more fulfilled where I am now than where I probably would have ended up. So for me, that was it. Another really important thing I learned was that that self-belief again. I had someone I admire greatly, who I worked with, got a position in a very male-dominated area. And she was actually asked in the interview, how are you going to cope in this male-dominated sector? And her response was, I have every right to be here. And so I learned a lot from that. I think you really do need to believe that you have every right to be there. And you need to strive to make sure that you're the right person there. So those two things taught me an enormous amount about myself and about teams and about leadership.
Yeah. And that, it sounds like it's that reconnecting to your values, which were education, and then allowing yourself to go down that path, and
enabling yourself, really.
Yes. Yeah.
And having a go. I mean, you don't know when you set out on a 4-year study journey how you're going to like it, how successful you will or won't be. You've got to allow yourself to fail. You've got to allow yourself to be challenged. And, I often get asked by students, oh, is there an exam? Because they don't, people don't like exams. I don't like exams either. But exams challenge you and they force you to prepare for a particular goal. And that's something really valuable. So facing up to those sorts of fears and challenges is what makes you a better operator, a better leader, a better employee. So that's really important, not to see potential failure as something that's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. It's I know there's a lot more talk about failure being a worthwhile part of the life process, and there's a lot of the social media memes about failure is it's only part of your journey. We all need to fail to learn, fail fast, fail often, fail quietly, whatever you want to call it. I just wish I don't know that we always take that all the way in, though. There's still that thing, isn't there? But most of the time, on the other side of that failure is a whole lot of growth and a whole lot of opportunity that we've been gifted, if we're open to it, to learn about ourselves and our process and whatever it is we've been working on.
And a lot of it is framed in the language itself, because no one wants to see fail on their academic testament. No one wants to say fail, sorry, you failed. But if you think of yourself as not yet successful,
yes,
well, you're actually still learning, you're still on the journey, and there's still potential for success. So sometimes the language we use is extremely important in terms of how we frame people's attitudes.
Yeah, very powerful, definitely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So when it comes to your own people, you say the people at the Governance Institute, how do you help others in the team or across the organisation fire up their self-leadership?
Well, I like to think about it in terms of how I like to be led. Everyone's different, though. You need to figure out your people. And it really comes down to, a salesperson needs to understand their client. A presenter needs to understand their audience. An educator needs to understand their students. It's the same across many professions. So you need to understand your team members. And you hired them for a reason. They got through a selection process because they had particular skills, abilities, qualifications. So you need to then build on that.
Yeah.
I do feel a little bit sorry for young people these days. I think sometimes employers want you to come with the full package. And there you go, you're ready to go. There's still a lot of development and training required once you get to a role for everyone. So once you've hired those people, you have a duty of care to them to develop them. Most people like a bit of autonomy. They don't want you over their shoulder. They want to be able to display their strengths, use their skills effectively, contribute. They want to be challenged. And they have certain responsibilities. And my view when I start a new job is I'm responsible for this, so let me do it. I often use that and say, well, these are your responsibilities. I'm here to support you, but you need to achieve this. So let's work together to see how you're going to do that. And at some point you step back.
Yes.
People do that themselves. And I think the greatest compliment is when you develop people to a point where they go on to bigger and better things, or they achieve a certain level of mastery so that they then become leaders themselves. So, people have apologized to me in the past for leaving because they've got great promotions. And I say that's a compliment, and I hope that I've contributed in some way to you getting there. And I think that's important as leaders, that people they're on a journey with you.
Yes.
You're not there to keep them where they are. You're there to ensure that they become leaders themselves. Now, whether that's a titled role or whether it's a leader within the organisation in terms of their area of specialty, that's what you're there for. So if you're not doing that, and people aren't really excelling in their own roles with their own strengths under your leadership, perhaps you as a leader need to do some work.
Yes.
So, and it comes back to that self-awareness. Am I motivating people? Am I supporting them sufficiently? Are they excelling? A school principal I once knew who was amazing. He said to the parents at parent-teacher night, he said, if you can't see anything positive about your child, there's something wrong with you. So I always think that way in terms of leadership, that, if I'm not seeing those things, then I'm not looking in the right places.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And what you were talking about with allowing people to be developed and leave and to continue on their journey, it's that old, I don't even know who first said it anymore, but because it gets attributed to so many people, but it's that what if we train them and they leave? And so what if we don't train them and they stay? That old chestnut. But it's a cliche for a reason. It's nowadays because it's so true. And if every organization through their leaders saw that as an obligation to some degree, that we need to develop our people, that as people move around this world and around their organizations, then surely we'll be reaping the benefit as people come in and as people move out. So
and I always live by that nobody is indispensable. Some people are more difficult to replace, but the new person will always bring something different, a new perspective, a new way of doing things, new ideas, and that's always positive. So, that your job as leader is to create other leaders. So,
yeah, definitely. Thank you. So, what's the last question for you? What's the one thing you wish you knew about self-leadership when you first stepped into a leadership role?
Well, I guess it comes down to I wish I had more self-belief. But then it is something you develop with time and experience. So I do admire a lot of young people these days, and our organisation is fantastic. We have people who are in their 20s and people who are in their much older than that. I won't mention age.
They're over 21.
Yes. So it's fantastic that we have so many different demographics across staff, and we learn so much from each other. You know, I learned so much, for example, from the marketing manager who, you know, knows all the ins and outs of social media channels and things like that. And, you know, it's not something that comes naturally to my demographic, I don't think anyway. I shouldn't say that because lots of people my age probably embrace it. But I think that developing that self-belief for me was quite a long journey. Okay. But I think younger people, and I look at my own daughters and my son today, they have that self-belief much earlier, which is a great thing. Some of it might be my parenting, some of it is their education system, some of it is the way things are communicated today. So that would have been great. Yes. And I like to think, where could I be now if I had that self-belief a lot earlier? So that's important. But also I wish I'd known that I should be telling myself that I should be there in that role. Because, and that's once again self-belief. But you really do need to understand that you need to tell yourself that before you can tell others. So, you know, when you're being interviewed and you're telling others that you really should be getting this job, if it's not something you've told yourself and you really have a confidence about, it's not going to be believed. So it comes down to what my friend said. She said, you know, I have every right to be here. And if you don't believe that yourself, then you've got to put some processes or some learning or something in place to get yourself to that state of belief. So that you can then have the confidence to take on those additional roles or to even apply for them. So traditionally, statistically, actually, women will make sure they tick off, you know, 8 out of 10 boxes before they'll apply for a role, whereas it's not quite the same statistically for men.
That's right.
So I think answers might be different to this question between males and females. Certainly for me, it was different. And it took me a lot longer to develop that self-belief.
And I think if you're, you know, if you look at where your kids are now, you need to take all the credit. So, you know.
I might give some to my husband, maybe.
Sorry.
I also think the education system takes a lot of credit because it's very different from when I was a student, when I was a child.
Well, you were talking before about doing some reflective journaling. I never heard that. And that's, you know, we're at the receiving end of the current day's thinking of best practice. And I'm okay with that. You know, I don't believe that our education, particularly in Australia, well, I don't believe anywhere that any education system sets out to ruin someone. You know, I'm pretty sure that's not in their ethos. But again, you know, one of the things that I think now I'm way on the other side of the sort of the primary and secondary side of things, you know, you look at what's being offered now, and I think this is great. This is awesome. They're knowing better. They're doing better, you know. And yes, I get a little bit jealous, and yes, I get to have a little bit of, you know, FOMO because I'm not a kid anymore. But at the same time, thank goodness they haven't stood still, and thank goodness that young people today are not getting what I got today. I think that comes back to that point you said before as well, as a leader, how am I evolving, how am I continuously improving myself and not being in a fixed state. So coming back to your original part of your original definition of self-leadership. So yeah, thank you for that. I think your points about self-belief and saying yes sooner, and I should be in that role, are really great lessons that hopefully others will hear from this video. So thank you, Sally.
Thank you. I enjoyed speaking to you.
Any last words you want to share?
Last words. Continuous learning, lifelong learning is very important for leaders. The leaders of our society and the policymakers may have done significant learning, but it could be quite some time ago. And my view is that if you did those hard yards 10, 20 years ago or even more, congratulations for doing it. That's fantastic. But the world has changed and you probably need to think about what you're going to do next. So, I like to have mid to long-term plans in my life, and so I'm always thinking, where to next? And I think that's an important mindset if you're a leader.
Yeah.
Where to next for me? Where to next for my team? Where to next for my organisation?
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. And so, Sally Graham, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today on the Spark Self-Leadership video series. I really appreciate hearing your perspective on this from an educator perspective. So thank you so much. This is Sally Foley-Lewis. Thank you for being on another episode of the Spark Self-Leadership video series. There will be a lot more to come. Thank you and bye for now.